After that day together, Marco's life changed forever. Before telling you this incredible story, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next exciting stories. Now let's take a step back to understand how we got to this point. Marco and Sylvia had been married for more than 40 years. They met in high school. Marco, who was about to graduate, and Sylvia, who was still living her adolescence lightheartedly. Today, Marco was 61 and Sylvia 57. Even though their children and grandchildren lived far away, they managed to maintain a strong bond with annual visits. In recent years, their life had been quiet and peaceful. Marco devoted himself to growing plants on the balcony, while Sylvia became passionate about her favorite soap operas, especially after Marco gave her a new television. But something had changed. Sylvia had become tense and nervous, and their arguments, once rare, had become frequent. Every little gesture could spark an argument, like when Marco made coffee and forgot about Sylvia's diet. Determined to bring back serenity, Marco decided to surprise Sylvia. He invited her to the Pink Flamingo, their favorite bar, a symbol of their love story. Sitting at the table, they ordered 2 coffees and began to remember happy moments from the past. "Do you remember when we used to walk in this park, and I used to pick those flowers for you?" Marco asked, hoping to see a smile on Sylvia's face. She smiled, but her eyes remained sad. "Shall we take a walk in the park? That would be nice," Marco suggested. Sylvia looked down at her coffee cup. "Sorry, Marco, I don't feel like it." Marco understood that something serious was bothering his wife, but he decided not to force her to talk. Later, as Marco was walking away to go to the bathroom, Sylvia received a mysterious call. "Good afternoon, Sylvia. Remember our meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock?" said an unfamiliar voice. Sylvia nodded and took note of the instructions. As they walked home, Marco felt a growing knot of anxiety in his chest. Every furtive glance from Sylvia, every silence seemed loaded with secrets. That night, he couldn't sleep, tormented by his thoughts. He imagined terrible scenarios. Maybe Sylvia was sick and didn't want to tell him, or there was something else she was hiding. The next morning, Sylvia got up early and got ready to go out. "Honey, I have to go to the hairdresser," she said. Marco looked at her suspiciously but decided not to question her. Sylvia instead went to a psychic. She entered a study decorated with esoteric objects and papers, looking for answers she couldn't find on her own. The psychic, a young woman with an enigmatic face, welcomed her with a smile. "What's worrying you, Sylvia?" he asked in a calm voice. Sylvia showed her an old photograph and a comb, explaining her torment. The psychic began her ritual, shuffling cards and lighting candles. "It's too early to tell," he said finally, leaving Sylvia even more confused. As she walked home, doubts assailed her. Did she really need answers from a stranger? Wouldn't it have been better to speak directly with Marco? Marco, meanwhile, had sought comfort from his friends, but their answers did not reassure him. He decided to take matters into his own hands. When Sylvia returned, she found her deep in thought. "How's your hair?" Marco asked, trying to break the ice. "Good, thanks," Sylvia replied absent-mindedly. That evening, while watching a movie, Marco realized he couldn't wait any longer. "Sylvia, is there something you're not telling me?" she asked, her heart in her throat. Sylvia looked at him, tears in her eyes, and decided to confess. "I haven't been faithful to you, Marco," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. I've sought comfort elsewhere, but now I realize that the only person I love is you. If you like the video, it would be kind if you give it a precious like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Marco was silent for a moment, the pain evident on his face. I forgive you, Sylvia, he finally said, but we need to figure out how to move forward from here. Sylvia told of their meeting at the Pink Flamingo, of how memories of the past had helped her find her way back to Marco. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to save our marriage, she said, determined. Marco took her hand. I love you, Sylvia. We've overcome so much together, and we can overcome this too, he replied with a sad smile. Sylvia, relieved by her husband's words, felt a huge weight lift from her chest. Thank you, Marco. I don't know what I would do without you, she whispered, tears still in her eyes. Come, let's sit down and talk about this, Marco said, leading her to the couch. We need to be honest with each other to rebuild what we've lost. They spent the evening talking, exchanging views, exposing their fears and insecurities. Every word, every look seemed to bring them a little closer. The night wore on, but neither of them wanted to stop talking. Do you remember when we first met? Sylvia asked, a nostalgic smile on her face. You were so serious, but at the same time so charming. Marco chuckled. And you were so lively, so full of life. You won me over from the first moment. Their bond, fueled by years of shared experiences, seemed to be rekindled that night. They rediscovered why they had fallen in love, the little things that had given meaning to their life together. The next day, they decided to take a walk in the park, just as they had done many years before. Spring was blooming, and flowers filled the air with sweet scents. Marco picked a bunch of daisies and handed them to Sylvia, who looked at him with eyes full of love. I love you, Marco, more than I've ever loved anyone, Sylvia said, clutching the daisies to her chest. I love you too, Sylvia, and I promise to always be by your side, Marco replied, hugging her tightly. Their story, although marked by suffering and disappointment, found new strength in sincerity and forgiveness. Marco and Sylvia decided to face the future together, strong in the love that had united them for all those years. And you? How would you have reacted in Marco's place? Would you have forgiven? In your opinion, is it possible to overcome a betrayal and rebuild a love stronger than before?